All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. We might have a few people trickle in as we continue on, but it's great to see all of you guys here. Miss McFarland, thank you for joining us and being willing to speak on this occasion. So I guess just to start off with, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
All over. It'll sort of explain it as I go through the program because I'm going to touch on different places where I've lived and differences. So I currently live in Cambridge, North Carolina, which is a suburb of Charlotte. I grew up in the state of Virginia, so I'm really sort of a northern southerner. So do you want me to start?
Yes, ma'am. If you have something put together, yeah, you can go ahead and.
Okay, I might as well. It's nice to see so many nice young faces and an older one that I happen to know from somewhere else. I've spent a lot of time on Zoom recently and looking at faces that look like their driver's permits, and you don't look that way, and I appreciate that. I really wish I could be there with you because I feel like I could learn from you, and even in my dotage, I'm still learning. My life spans segregation, integration, female discrimination, and most recently, age discrimination. So I would like to share with you some things from each of these eras. And fortunately, you have a long time before you go through some of these, but I hope to give you some ideas. Thanks to the gift of music, though, I've had a great life full of varied and wonderful experiences and lots of fun. I hope that after I talk to you and share some of my experiences and some of the things that I have learned, and not always the best way, you will feel encouraged and you'll have some fuel for thought. And if you have some questions, I'd be very happy to answer them. Most of us had our early education in music at a time when we weren't aware of it. We were infants being rocked and patted on the back and being fed, most likely, and someone would be humming or singing a song trying to get you to go back to sleep so that they could relax again. So your very early music education is something you don't really realize. If you're fortunate, you grew up in a house where you learn to patty cake and you play simple songs and people have just a really good time and you get exposed to music. And being exposed to music at a young age is extremely important because exposure is necessary for appreciation. And if you don't develop a love for something, it's like food that you eat. When you eat lots of food and you get your favorites and you develop a love for food, well, music is the same way. If you don't sample it, you're never going to develop a love for it. So if you work with children, even in the preschool category, expose them to all sorts of music. They're like little sponges, and this gives them a good start in life for this appreciation. Okay, let's go to our early grades. When we hit our early grades, we sometimes get to go to churches that have good music programs, and sometimes they have ORF programs and bells. If you work in a church situation and you see a child that's particularly gifted, give them something extra to do. I'm extremely grateful to my home church because in the 4th grade, I started playing the piano for opening exercises for Sunday school. And from there on in, they gave me a job and I went right on up the ladder. And finally, my senior year in high school, I had my first paying job, which was directing the children's choir. So if you find someone that's very capable, make sure that you give them something extra and encourage. Encouragement at this stage is also important so that people will carry this on. Schools at this point often have fairly good music programs, and some schools even offer instruments in the 4th and 5th grade. I have a personal quirk at this particular time because so many children's choir directors and children's music teachers in the public schools like to take recordings and teach their children songs with recordings. Well, children are like little apes, and they copy what they hear. And what they hear is not always naturally what they should be doing. So they're training children to sing sometimes too loud, not what is naturally for their voice development. And this really upsets me. It's far better to take something simple and develop leadership. You're not going to develop leadership if you ask a child to constantly sing with someone else who's singing. There's no need for it. They just follow along. So that happens to be a personal quirk of mine when it comes to grade school music. Okay, let's go to high school. Most high schools have good choral and instrumental programs. Are there any future band directors in this group? Okay, I want to share an experience that I had in high school. Now, I was in high school back in the 50s. We didn't have the big high schools like you have now with the big programs with all the support from the parents. The band directors usually directed in several schools. So when it came time for festivals back where I was in school, the band director who was connected with several schools would take the best students out of each school and form a band. Well, you can imagine what uniforms were. Ours were horrible sweaters. But we wanted to march in a festival one time, and we asked our band director to please let us have a uniform. Well, there was no money for uniforms. There was no help to get it. So he did something very clever. He had us all get white tennis shoes, blue jeans, men's white shirts. He provided red handkerchiefs with ping pong balls that had holes cut in them, and we could put them around our neck, and straw hats. We looked like gigantic hayseeds. But he had us play for our main march. She'll be coming around the mountain. We were participating in a festival. We marched last in the parade. We had a wonderful time. We got one of the big high awards for bands that time. And I tell you this because sometimes it takes creativity to make up for the lack of funds, and it can be done. It's not easy, but and we felt bad about it initially, but we had so much fun, and hey, our costumes were very comfortable. So anyway, I tossed that out to band directors. I had another experience when I was in high school, which taught me about checking on instruments when you're going to play them. I was in a competition which required talent. I decided, okay, I'll play the piano. I checked out the piano early in the day and it seemed fine, but they hadn't decorated for the event. That night I walked out on the stage and there the piano was, wrapped in gold foil paper with a big red bow on top, just like a big box. Now it looked good with the decorations, but I sat down and I played Chopin's Minute Waltz that sounded like it was written for piano and percussion. I'll never forget it. And that drove the point home that never play an instrument unless you've checked it at the very last. That also made me decide that I never wanted to enter one of those competitions again. Okay, we've been through high school, let's go to college, where you are now. I hope none of you try to do what I did. I got a Bachelor of Arts degree, but I did not get a music degree. I had a major in music. I went through in 3 years, which is insane. Someone asks me about my college life and I say one word, study. I had to keep a B+ average in order for the dean to let me carry these horrendous overloads of classes. But it did help in one instance. I went to school for 2 years. I was out for a year. And then I went back and graduated with the class that I started with. But it was not the important thing to do, and it was not wise at all. One very good thing that happened was my voice teacher convinced me that I should join SAI. I did, and I've had wonderful contacts as I've moved around because of the membership there. So if any of you are interested and wonder about it, it is a good organization, and I'm very happy that I've joined. I did have one sad experience when I was a senior in college, and it's something that's overcome now, but I will share it with you. Our annual joint concert with our concert choir with a choir from a university in the north got canceled 6 weeks before we were to go north to be with them. And it was because their choir was integrated and ours was not. This is something that has, this is not a problem anymore, and I'm very happy for it, but we were very, very disappointed. Okay, I finished college and it's time to get out in the big world. I find myself living in southern Texas, and I'm full of how you're supposed to sing the English language. Well, it's Christmas time, and the choir is singing about the holy night and the stars being bright and everything being light. I had to just get rid of my proper singing English. I joined the Southern Texas choir and sang Bright Light Night. Okay, let's go to Arizona. Wonderful SAI chapter there. If any of you moved to Phoenix, be sure and look it up. I was very, very excited because one of the SAI alums was coming back from a tour in Europe, and she was going to be playing a concert of her husband's piano music. Her husband was the resident composer at Arizona State. I went to the concert. I spent the first 3/4 of the concert sitting there, trying to find a melody line, trying to find something in the music that I could grasp. I spent the last quarter of the program trying to figure out what I was going to say when I went to the reception afterwards, because I didn't want to sound like a dope, but I didn't understand what was going on, which drove the point home that if you're into music, you need to have an understanding of all eras, not just the one that you particularly like. So because of that, the following summer, I came back east to my alma mater and enrolled in graduate school. And one of the classes I took was 20th century composition, because I wanted to be able to, the next time I went to something like that, be able to make some intelligent comment at the close of it. So I toss that out to you so that those of you in music, please make sure that you do have at least a talking knowledge of the different eras, and not just those that mean the most to you as an individual. Okay, that takes care of Arizona. Let's go to California. In California, I had 3 jobs at Travis Air Force Base Chapel. I was a Lutheran organist. Well, thanks to the organization in the Lutheran liturgy, I learned a lot about the church year, and this was very valuable for future jobs working in churches. I was a soloist for a general Protestant worship service. This was the second service on Sunday morning, and this helped me build repertoire so that I could go anywhere and be asked to sing in a church, and I had something appropriate for that particular time. And I also directed a children's choir. Now, this was during the Vietnam War. This was in the mid-60s, and there were lots of wounded that were brought back to that particular hospital. So I would take my children's choir, and we would go sing for the wounded, and they loved it. So I quite often would take my children's choir over there, and we would have rehearsal. And this is a type of thing which is terrific community outreach. If you live somewhere close to a senior citizen center or someplace, try using some of those facilities for rehearsals if you have a group. It means a lot to the people that are there. And it's, like I say, it is terrific community outreach. Of course, you can't do it during the pandemic, but that's fuel for thought for the future. Okay, I'm through in the United States. I'm going to get out of the States. I'm going to Guam. I'm on this little island that's 4 to 8 miles long. 4 to 8 miles wide and 30 miles long. And I pick up the newspaper, and at the university, they're going to have an opera, and they have open auditions. So, okay, I'm going to go audition for it. I went to the audition and was invited to join several of the performing groups on the island. And one of them was to be on the list of performers for Government House. It seems that the governor liked classical music, and he was promoting classical music on this little island out in the Pacific, which was I found very interesting because I didn't see that much support back on in this country. So I want to share with you one of the programs. Uh, there were 3 people on the program, a lady from Germany singing German lieder, a wonderful Filipino violinist, and me. So someone from Europe, someone from Asia, someone from the United States. And who were we singing? Who were we performing for? The chieftains and the officials from the different island groups out in the Pacific. So we could not talk to each other. We could not sit down and carry on a conversation, but through music we could communicate. So if you can picture this wonderful scene, and I'll never forget it. It was a beautiful moonlit night, was in a wonderful big room, was glass, could look out over the Pacific Ocean, see the wonderful moonlight, and look into a room of people, some of them dressed in their native costumes. Couldn't talk to them, we could smile, but through music we communicated. And this drove home the real power of music. Music is an international language. We could speak to each other through music, but we couldn't talk to each other in a conversation. So that was something that I'll always remember. I got an invitation to sing at a junior high school on the island. It seemed that the music teacher had played something from an opera, and these children had heard someone sing high notes, and they'd never heard anything like that before. So she asked me to come and bring a couple of arias or something where I could sing high notes so that those students could see me do this. So I did, and I'll never forget, there was a young man in the back of the class, and he raised his hand and he said, "Did it hurt?" I said, "Did it look like it hurt?" And he said, "No." But he'd never heard anything like that, and he couldn't understand how anybody could make a noise like that, and it didn't hurt. I spent the rest of the afternoon singing their choice songs out of their books that had what they called high notes in them. But there again is an example of you develop a liking for what you've heard, and they'd never heard anybody sing, I guess, anything but folk music or something that was very low. So that also drove the point home that, hey, if you're going to sing, make it look easy. Don't let it look like it hurts. I got called for a teaching position at the University of Guam. Now it seems that the piano teacher, who was a wonderful piano teacher from the Philippines, had done something that the people at the university felt was unbecoming of a college professor. He had played piano in a piano bar in the capital city, and so they fired him 2 weeks before school was to start. Well, there were a few people on the island who could play fairly well, but they were attached to other schools. So I get this call, an invitation to, and my first response was, "I play the piano. I'm not a pianist. I can't teach." They were desperate, so I agreed to go try. Fortunately, there weren't any advanced piano students. I could help them, but I felt very inferior because I had never trained to do this sort of thing. But I was on the faculty with 3 gentlemen. I had to accompany the college choir and do some other things. I had to teach singing diction to English singing diction to the Trust Territory students, which was a challenge because we don't have the same sounds in our language. And I would get this McFarland. We don't have that sound. So I learned a lot in teaching them. I hope they learned some things from me, but they did a good job. And I really must say that they were a joy to work with. Their work ethic and their desire to do things right was such a pleasure. In fact, I found this with all the people I associated with from the islands in Southeast Asia. There was always this desire not to do things and get through them, but to do them right. And that's, you don't find that everywhere, but they made it a pleasure for me. And I also got to help in the opera theater, as well as I directed a choir on the Anderson Air Force Base. Then one of the most remarkable programs I ever attended was given by the students, and the students designed it themselves. They were not going home for Christmas. They were going to have this gigantic Christmas party, and they invited me, and I did not know what to expect. And this is what I found. The party was on the beach at sundown. There were tiki torches out there. The surroundings were absolutely wonderful. And each group of students from their islands would get up, and the entire evening was spent with song and dance. I saw some of the most gorgeous dancing and heard some of the most unusual songs. And that's all it was. They all shared what they would do at Christmas as far as song and dance. And then they closed the evening with singing of something that I knew, Silent Night. They sang it from all their languages from all the islands. And then they sang it in English. I think of it every Christmas. It was really a gorgeous and unusual experience. Okay, I'm going to come back to the United States, and I'm going to ECU, and I'm going to graduate school. So now I am where you are. This is at the height of the Vietnam War. It's the end of the 60s, going into the 70s. I arrive in Greenville. I put a military sticker on my car, and whoops, my tires get slashed, and I'm accused of being a wife of a warmonger. It was an interesting time to be in Greenville. So what I did was I just got myself busy, and I buried myself in Fletcher if I wasn't in my house, and soon let that pass by. But one night I had something very interesting happen at the end of a program. There was a family that would come to the university to all the various programs, and I got to talking to them, and the lady said to me, our daughter is married to a musician. He's a pianist, and he teaches in a college. And I said, oh, where? She said, oh, he's left the United States. He's the piano teacher at the University of Guam. Who would have thought I would have come back to Greenville and meet someone connected to the person who was taking the job that I was holding at the university in Guam. At any rate, I was glad they now have a really qualified piano teacher to do what I had tried to do. Okay, finished graduate school, ready to hit the big world again. It's the early 70s, moved to Maryland, the metropolitan DC area. There again, good connection with SAI. They have a wonderful chapter there. Anybody who moves to Maryland or close to the DC area needs to explore it. I did several little interesting jobs. I was an interim organist at a small Moravian church. I get to learn about Moravian music, so more education. I did some performances with the Prince George's Opera Company, and then joined a 16-voice performance group. Then I stepped into the men's world. I prepared a Christmas music at Andrews Air Force Base at the main chapel for the director who was on tour. He was the baritone soloist narrator with the United States Marine Band. He was gone for 6 weeks. He needed someone to work out the music for his Christmas program. He got back in time for dress rehearsal and for the performance. In the newspaper, there was this big, long article about the choir, which was a very good choir. And there was a big paragraph at the end about the director. Well, you know, that he was his affiliation with the United States Marine Band, the president's own, his performances at the White House, yuckity, yuckity, yuck, which really didn't have anything to do with the program, but it presented him. Well, he was not the director the next year. He had to retire. And the next year, there was this big article about what was going to go on in as far as the music was concerned, and a very nice article about the program. And then there was this one sentence at the end about the director. The director is Mary McFarland, period. So my husband got a big kick out of that. And he said it might have at least mentioned that I was married to him, blah, blah, but nevertheless. I was the first female music director at Andrews Air Force Base for the Protestant music programs. Well, it meant I had 7 bosses, 6 to 7 worship services on Sundays. I directed 3 of the 6 choirs and saw to it that everything else was taken care of. But I went to the first meeting of these 7 chaplains, and I walked in the room, and there's this quiet, and someone said, "What do you want us to call you?" And I looked at them and I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, someone else said, "Well, how do you want us to address you?" And I frowned, and someone said, "Do you want to be called a mistress of music?" And I froze. I said, "No, I don't like the connotation of that." And so I said, "What about what did you call the person before me?" "The director of music." And I said, "Why can't I have that title?" So I became the director of music. Um, but I'll never forget that. They didn't know what to do with me. I had invaded their world. Fortunately, shortly after that, the first female chaplain um, came into the service, and it came to that base. So I wasn't the only female, but it was a very interesting job. I got to organize the music for the first Martin Luther King Jr., sorry, services that were held annually. And I learned a great deal about dealing with people. I learned how people feel about things. And after about the third year, I had good control over what was going on. So I also got to do ecumenical work, which was interesting. We capitalized on the things we had in common instead of the things we had that were different. And that was a real joy to get a group of chaplains and a group of people that would work together and do things in common. One thing that happened was really sad, and it wasn't my idea. One of the chaplains decided that we needed to swap the choirs once a month from the different churches. Well, now these churches, we had the contemporary service, we had the gospel service, we had the liturgical service, we had all the different types with the choirs and music to match, and they wanted to move the choirs around. Well, I had no choice but to schedule it. We did it 1 month. The gospel choir went to the traditional service. The contemporary choir took its guitars and drums and went to one of the general Protestant services. The traditional choir went to a gospel service. On the Monday after that Sunday, my phone rang off the hook. Everybody was mad. The congregations were mad because I had screwed up the music in their services. The choirs were mad because I had made them go where they didn't want to go and felt like they didn't fit. It was really an insane idea. And I had problems because of that. Everybody disliked everybody. All the services didn't like each other, and I had to do something to bring them back together. So I decided to take a neutral time, bring all the choirs together, give each one of them 8 minutes, and have them sing for each other and invite the people in the various congregations to join us in hopes of smoothing some of these ruffled feathers. Well, it did work. The different choirs sang something, and they all did a nice job, and we ended with a combined thing. And I had my children's choir and my youth choirs participate as well. The only problem that rose out of the evening was in my children's choir, because I had trained them to stand quietly to sing. And when the gospel choir got up and sang and moved around, all these little boys are staring at me. And I got hit at the next rehearsal with, "Ms. McFarland, you make us stand still and you don't make the other people." And my response to them was, "Look at the difference in music. You can't sing that music and stand still. You've got to move. It makes your whole, it's a body commitment." And so then they wanted to sing some music that they could use to make their bodies move too. And so I took one of their anthems and I rearranged it and I made it rhythmical, and I let them stand up and clap their hands, and they were happy. But there again, it's important that we understand what's going on and that we do share and we do get an understanding of why we do certain things when we do them. So that was, I took what could have been a disaster and it turned into somewhat of a success. We did have off-base invitations, and I found out as a female, when I would request bus transportation, I didn't get very far. But I had a member in my adult choir that was a colonel at the Pentagon. And so when I needed a bus, I sort of pulled rank and I let him go get it. And because I had to get things done, and I had to learn to play the system. In 1976 was a great time to be in DC. There was so much going on with the bicentennial. The 16th Voice performance group that I was with did a lot of entertaining in the some of the large homes around DC. And let me tell you, all those places it said that George Washington slept there, no way. He'd still be alive trying to sleep. My cats just opened the door. Let's hope they don't get up here. I've got two cats, Aria and Cadenza, and believe you me, if you see something going like this, they're walking in front of me. At any rate, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Okay. Oh, with the performance group. Most of us had been in the cast of 1776 and 75 when it was done in Bowie, Maryland. And we had had our period costumes made with the idea that we would wear them in 76 for entertaining. And we got to go around to lots and lots of interesting houses and places. And our group was chosen to go to the Kennedy Center to represent the state of Maryland on Maryland Day. And sing there in the foyer. And even in the foyer, the Kennedy Center, the acoustics are wonderful, and you can enjoy it. Okay, let's leave DC and come back to North Carolina. Arrived back in North Carolina, the first thing I was told that women directors are not desirable. I applied for a job in a nice large area church, and they wouldn't even look at me. They were told not to look at anybody that had a local address. Well, I had a local address, but there wasn't a thing on my resume that was local, but they still would not look at me. I was asked to direct the area choral society until they could find a male director. So I said, okay. 18 and a half years later, I resigned. Part of the reason I stayed was I do have a certain amount of success in program building. And I would like to share with you my formula because I have found it very worthwhile. I take my program and I divide it into thirds. I found that a lot of people that are excellent musicians program themselves out of the following because their programs are too stuffy. You take a third of your program and do that which shows off your virtuosity, what you're capable of doing, what the group is capable of doing. Establish your great musicianship. Take another third and give the audience something that they can hang on to, something that they will like, something that will make them want to come back. And then take the other third and make it a bridge between the two. I did this with this particular choral society, and we really built into a nice group. Now, those of you may have already been asked, or you will be asked to adjudicate in some sort of competition. Well, let me tell you what happened to me. I was asked to be a judge for hymn playing for some piano competitions that they were having here. And I took my judging skills and I did it the same way I had done it in Maryland. Well, that didn't fit here. About 3/4 of the way through the morning of the competitions, the head piano teacher came to me and said, everybody's mad at you. You're keeping their students from getting such and such a trophy, and some of them can't go on to the next competition. Well, they were treating the piano solos, the hymns, they all sounded alike. I felt sometimes that we were lucky that they started and ended in the same key. So obviously this was something that was not important. They wanted someone to sit down and say, you're wonderful, sign their names, and they go on and get their little trophies. Well, needless to say, I was not asked to judge again, and I wouldn't have gone back anyway. I believe in encouragement. I believe in doing everything positive you can, but I do not believe in giving someone a false sense of accomplishment. I think it does a disservice. But the lady who told me how unhappy everybody was did come back and say to me later, "You're exactly right. Your judging across the board was very consistent and very good." But it didn't make up for the fact that I was hated by all the teachers. Okay, the next really exciting thing in the last, in the mid-'80s, the church we had belonged to put in a 48 bell concert pitch carillon. When I first heard it, I thought it was rather ugly. It sounded like someone went up in the tower, played as many bells as they could, as loud as they could, as fast as they could, and it didn't sound musical at all. Until one day someone went up and played a melody line. It was kind of lovely, and I thought, oh, I want to learn to play this. So the music director at the church could play it, and he was the one who was playing. So he taught me the rudiments, and then he left. So I'm left with this carillon to play, and I'm doing the interim at the church at the same time. Well, there is something different about the carillon. It has a minor third in the overtone series. So you don't take piano music and you don't take organ music to play on the carillon. If any of you like to compose or arrange, I invite you to try doing some for this instrument. It's a little bit different. You can take the same chords, but you do the spacing differently, and you can work it out, but you have to deal with this minor third in the overtone series. At any rate, being a competitive person, I decided if I'm going to play this thing, I'm going to be certified. So I put myself through teaching myself really, because I wasn't a teacher. I taught myself to play. I submitted the paperwork and a recording and was invited to play for a judged recital, and I got my certification as a certified carillonneur in the Guild of Carillonneurs in North America. And for several years after that, I had really good times going around and playing recitals at different places. Then I get called from the church that would not see me when I first moved here because of my local address. And I had meanwhile done an interim there, to come back and do another interim. And then they decided that they were tired of having me come in and do interim work for them. Would I please just stay as director? So I was there for 8 years. But it was from that job that I was put out to pasture due to my age. Okay. What happened was the really good organist that I worked with got discouraged because of some things going on in the church, and he left, and we hired a new organist, and he was wonderful organist, but he had one flaw. He didn't work with you, you worked for him. And he didn't like old people. Well, I was old. So he started off calling me the old cow, and I referred to him as the young upstart. I tried to laugh it off, and then he would say things to me like, you know, when you take the kids out in the church van, if you have an accident, it's going to automatically be your fault because you're old. And I thought, okay. But I was so busy, and I liked my job so much, I just didn't let it get to me too much. Well, people started coming to me and saying, you know, he's trying to get your job. And I said, oh no, nobody's going to pay any attention to it. Well, the pastor left, and in came an interim pastor, and the interim pastor bought it. So I was put out to pasture. I could have been really, really upset about it, but it was probably time that I go anyway, because I had a husband with a very bad debilitating disease, and I was probably not going to get to work too much longer. So I didn't make too much of an issue out of it. However, it did hurt after all these years to be, put out because I was old. Unfortunately, the program died when I left. The people left, my youth choir folded, and that hurt. But I had to stay on for 6 months after I left as a music director, because I had agreed to play at International Carillon Festival. All the publicity had gone in as a representative from that church. All the pictures were from that church carillon, and I was sort of stuck. So anyway, I stayed and played the carillon 2 Sundays a month, and when I finished with the festival, I evaporated. So that takes me through to the year 2020. The beginning of this year, I was still playing and teaching carillon. I was a substitute organist for several little churches, and I was teaching preschool, which is what I had gone to teaching preschool music part-time after leaving the church job. And then what happened? March, and everything comes to a halt. I did go back and play the carillon for Holy Week, and the people in the community really appreciated it. They said it sounded like something normal was going on because everything was very, very quiet. Nobody was on the roads. It was almost an eerie time, if you can remember back how things happened when the pandemic first came upon us. Kaylee and I did a July the 4th concert, probably the biggest audience we've ever had, because people needed to get out. They could drive in their cars and go sit in the parking lot in their cars and not be next to anybody. And some people brought lawn chairs and they were spread out all over the lawn. The two of us actually played side by side, and we had masks on. So that was a good service to the community, because the people could come out and they really wanted to do something. And then in May, our church started an outdoor service. And so ever since May, on Sunday mornings, I go and play 15 minutes before that service. So I've continued to do that. And that will happen through next Sunday. And thank goodness they're stopping the outdoor service, because it was cold this morning. And I will no longer be playing before that, but they do have an indoor service, and I will switch. So that brings us up to the current time. I have hit the highlights of some of my many experiences throughout my long life. And let me tell you, you get out of life what you put into it. So put something into your education, go out in the world, put something into the world, never stop learning, and have a good time. And I thank you for sharing your time with me. And if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to, or if you'd like to tell me something. I'm sorry I can't be there, because I know I could learn from you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McFarland, for that presentation. That was awesome. Guys, if y'all want to ask questions, go for it. I guess I'll start with what's your secret, if that makes sense, to just getting, how did you, I mean, we heard how you got to where you are today, but as far as a mental secret, what do you tell yourself every day to kind of motivate you to keep going, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be learned, and I always feel like I need to learn something new, and to turn every experience into something. You know, it's a big, wide, wonderful world, and if we become satisfied with what we know, we miss out on everything. I'm nosy. I want to find out things. I guess that's probably it.
I call it curious, not no. I like curious. All right.
And I have a wild sense of humor.
That's good.
Ask Kaylee. Oh, thank you. Is it Jada?
Yeah. There goes my cat.
Okay. Oh, wait, what?
No, go for it.
Okay. So as you know, TBS is also a music organization. I know I've gone on and on about TBS at home, but do you have any suggestions for maybe, hang on, give me a second here. Words are hard. So we are, Mom, mute yourself. Okay, anyway, so we're a music organization and we do have like sorority hymns and stuff. And I was wondering if you have any ways to maybe suggest, do you have any good like warm-up ideas, how to like effectively warm up the voice, but also keeping it interesting and to encourage participation? To kind of get things rolling.
You say let's stand up and warm up, and you get all sorts of bent positions, attitudes. Everybody hates to warm up. I would suggest that you think of yourselves as, well, do you play an instrument? Most of you? All right. You wouldn't play a clarinet if it was bent. You wouldn't play a trumpet if the bell of the instrument was turned the wrong way. And yet you expect to sing slumped over, okay? So think of yourself maybe as a tube of toothpaste. You sit up straight, it comes out better. If you squeeze a tube of toothpaste in the middle, what happens? You get something here and something here, and it's not very effective. You say you're gonna warm up and you give people syllables where you get lip service. I would suggest that you take maybe your school song, take the melody line of it, and hum. Humming brings the voice up out of the throat, puts it up in the bell of your instrument. It gives you a focal point for all your singing. It doesn't tire your throat. Hum it in several different keys, and you warm up the instrument really well. If you're going to sing a solo or something and you're driving, turn on the classical music station and hum with what you hear. You will, if it's a classical station, you're going to be all over the map. As far as pitches are concerned, it warms up the voice really well. As far as vocal groups, I found out that it was a waste of time to do the usual warm-ups. People didn't pay that much attention. I would take a problem spot out of something we were working on and create a warm-up with it, with either a neutral syllable, humming, or if it was putting together parts, stack them one or another. Don't make it, if you say warm up, I don't think you accomplish too much, but if you make it fun. So try humming, see if it works. And if that doesn't work, think of something else. It's all a game. What works for one group doesn't necessarily work for the next. Does that help?
I guess I'll ask one more. Jada, go ahead, Jada.
Okay, I kind of want to ask about like the culture around teaching music and stuff. Has it like changed or stayed the same? Or like, are there like new styles of directing and new styles of music coming out, or has it for the most part stayed the same? And in continuing that, do you like the direction it's going, or if there is any
Yeah,
changes?
things are not static. Music does change. And, I found that out when I was, my first exposure to 20th century music, because we all have preferences, and things change in different places. Every place I've lived in the United States has had its own approach to things. And so there are subtle differences, and I think that's what's fun, and that's one reason I've always enjoyed teaching voice. Every instrument is different. We're all unique, and so it's a constant thing, figuring out ways to solve problems. I think in many ways we're smarter as time has grown on, or maybe I'm smarter. It's a learning process. I think we've come a long way with certain things, and we probably have a long way still to go. The thing that bothers me the most is that we spend an awful lot of time with, like I say, doing things, teachers, quick, let's do it quick. Here's a recording, let's sing with the recording. I would prefer the old-timey approach, and let's learn it and let's make it ours. Let's be creative on our own. That's the only thing that bothers me now, is there's so much. We can plug in something, we have instant gratification. We don't like to take the time to build slowly. And it's when you build slowly that you really appreciate and get things done. Does that answer your question? Okay. And of course, I'm speaking from many, many years, 80 plus. I will say, and I don't know if I said it when I was talking, if any of you have a keyboard facility, take some organ. It doesn't necessarily mean that you become an organist, but it has been a skill that I have had, that I have fallen back on, and it was just really a smart thing to do. Organists, there are not that many out there anymore, and you can do a lot of substituting. I would never, ever take a job doing on a big organ somewhere, but with Elmer's glue, I can still hold together a smaller service, and this is what is mainly needed. So if any of you have a keyboard facility, do consider organ. Or take a class in something you think you might not be interested in. If one of the classes I had at ECU that I really loved was a world music class, and we studied the different cultures and their music. I thought that was fascinating. I don't know if they still teach it there or not, but if you have room in your schedule and you like to know what's going on in the world, you might want to take that.
Does anyone have any other questions for Ms. McFarland?
I'm just curious. I'm actually a part of the SAI chapter at ECU. What chapter were you part of again for SAI? And
It was Madison College. I think it was Gamma Iota. I hope.
and thank you for sharing. I enjoyed it.
It was a worthwhile organization, and if you move around, it's a terrific in to different places, and some places have wonderful programs. And like in DC, they had access to such wonderful artists. It was really inspiring. So enjoy.
Thanks.
I had the question because you spoke about how you lived in the Maryland, D.C. area for quite a while. I myself am from there. I was wondering what areas you lived in while you were there.
I lived in Upper Marlboro.
That's literally my hometown. I'm from Calvert County. I lived in Dunkirk, and my best friend lived in Upper Marlboro, and my mom
Okay.
in the
Lived off Highway 301 in Upper Marlboro. My husband had to be within 20 miles of the flight line at Andrews Air Force Base, and that's why we were there. Oh, small world.
My mom worked in downtown Upper Marlboro in that building that oddly sat just in the center of the road for decades.
I know where that is.
Yeah, that's where my mom worked for about 10 years.
Okay, yeah. Busy area.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of traffic. But full of good culture. It was hard moving here from there.
Yeah, it's a different pace of life down here in the South compared to Maryland and being around DC and Annapolis.
Mm-hmm.
So her computer died, but
Just curious. I think you were talking about how you were like substituting at different churches on was it piano or organ or
Oregon.
another instrument? Organ. How did you get your name out there in the community in order to do that?
Oh, sometimes you just move to a community and you do something and someone else asks you to do something and it moves on. I never really, went anywhere and said, here I am. It just sort of evolved. And music is a wonderful way to make friends. What happens when you move to a new community? At least when I was moving around, you go find a church the first Sunday you're somewhere, and then you have friends. We moved around a lot. My husband was an Air Force pilot, so that's why we were so transient. And after we had lived here about 6 years, I was ready to move on again because it's exciting. And each place offers something new.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
I actually have a question. And, I've obviously known you my whole life, but I don't think I've ever asked you this. So I know you've worked with ages from preschoolers all the way up to adults. What would you say is your favorite age group to work with? Or do you have a favorite, or are there just pros and cons to each age group? Or
My favorite age group would be the group that I'm working with currently. There's been something about each one. My final age group that I worked with were little preschoolers. And I found that it was easy just to write songs and things that I wanted to do in creating a program for them. And they were like little sponges. It was so much fun. And I tried out all sorts of things. And in this particular preschool, sometimes there would be children come in from, there was a little girl who came in from China. She didn't speak a word of English. The child was 2 years old. She's plopped in this school. She can't talk to anybody. She's crying her eyes out. She comes to music class. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't have this. So I hand her scarves because I knew the Chinese did lots of things with scarves. She came alive. She stood up and we did all sorts of things with scarves. I found the little ones really exciting, and I had never really worked with them. But then I stop and think about it. With any group that I worked with, I sort of enjoyed. And I've gone the gamut now. I started at the University of Guam, even though I wasn't a qualified teacher at the time, but I got to work with the older students, and I've had some adult voice students that have come down. So the only thing I haven't tried is in utero, and perhaps that'll be next. But each group has a different set of challenges, and each group is fun. Did that answer your question, Kaylee?
Do we have any other questions for Ms. McFarland before we head out, guys? Is everybody okay? All right. I can't thank you enough, Ms. McFarland, for doing this. This has been an amazing experience, especially with these times with Corona and the virtual platforming. I really thank you for getting on here with us and Zoom call and everything.
Well, I've enjoyed it thoroughly, so thank you. And thank you, Kaylee.
If y'all don't mind, we're gonna take a picture just for our newsletter and everything. I need Michael, McKinley, Zach, and Nicole, if Nicole doesn't mind, everybody turning on their web cameras for this picture. Hey, Zach.
I knew it was going to happen.
Oh,
that's Aria. Cadenza will probably come next.
Beautiful. McKinley, is your webcam broken?
Oh, look.
Oh. Okay, since you got the fuzzy animal, we're gonna go ahead and take the picture. All right, everybody ready?
Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, beautiful guys. All right. Thank you, Miss McFarland.
Quite welcome.
You have a good night, ma'am.
You do the same.